Okay, so Jamie asked me to make a couple disclosures. So I'm going to start with this one. My travel costs were covered by the Nutritional Therapy Association. I'm almost done with my RD, registered dietitian credential, but I also attended that. I'm an omnivore. I believe in evolution. I live on a working farm. I have 2 books that talk about sustainable food production, and I counsel people on eating these foods. How do I stop it? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the U.S. Dietary Guidelines. You're probably all familiar with the food pyramid. That went away in 2010 and was replaced by MICA in order to make things a little more simple. So every 5 years, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines, which serve as the basis for all educational materials and guides public policy are reviewed. They are based on the most recent scientific research, but there are numerous flaws and conflicts of interest in the system. So one of the biggest things with the 2015 review is that only 27% of the science that was looked at came from the Nutrition Evidence Library. 45% came from existing evidence, and a lot of these sources included systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and reports from government or scientific organizations, and many of those had conflicts because they were supported by industry, and that was in order to save time and money. So basically, my feeling on this plate here is that it's confusing, wrong, it does not teach nutrition concepts, and it's overly simplistic. Plus, we don't need dairy grains. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So in order to keep things non-confusing, there's been a debate for the 2015 guidelines that we should also add sustainability. They recently, just before I came here, announced that they're not going to, but this is something that's hotly debated. And incredibly confusing. There are no agreed upon standards for measuring sustainability or defining it. One of the things the dietary guidelines mentioned in the review is that although they do not recommend eliminating lean meat, they advise reducing the consumption of red and processed meat. They found in their systematic review that lean meats were not consistently defined or handled similarly across the boards. In this case, it would have been problematic to distinguish lean meats from all others in the list. So basically, they just recommended all red meat, just cut it out. And so this image I actually got from Modern Farmer magazine, which is kind of a pop magazine that's come out and has a lot of interesting articles. But this is what we're being told is sustainable, okay? And nobody has done a life cycle analysis on this. So these are plants grown in plastic trays on steel racks under fluorescent lights with air enriched with CO2, heated with fossil fuels in a concrete building to grow lettuce, which isn't even a nutrient-dense food. My first degree is in art. I promise I'm a better artist than this, but I wanted to make a simplistic image for you that even a 12-year-old could understand. So this is my idea of sustainability, okay? So cows, herbivores, red meat are nutrient-dense, a very bioavailable protein to our bodies. They improve soil fertility. They improve water holding capacity. They can help sequester carbon. More humane than industrially raised pork and chicken. No routine antibiotics used, which can lead to less antibiotic resistance. Less exploitation of farm workers. It's more moral than a monocrop. So these are all the points I'm going to be going through in my presentation. Cheaper than products like Tofurkey. Is that a product? Okay, so you guys have that. And uses a lot less fossil fuels. So this is from the CDC. These are the most common deficiencies in the United States, very similar to worldwide. statistics as well. And guess what we can get from meat? A lot of these same vitamins. Meat is more satiating and bioavailable. These studies that are out there that are showing that meat will kill you are largely based on food recall and don't account for confounding factors. So people might remember that they ate meat 4 times last week, but they're going to forget the deep fried apple pie, the 67-ounce soda that they drank, and the fries with that. There's more omega-3s in grass-fed beef. It's a rich source of CLA, good source of selenium, which a lot of our soils are low in. And when I went to eatright.org, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who will be giving me my R&D certificate, when I went to their website to find out how I can get more iron and B12, beef was the top choice. So that's just an interesting thing there. We're also getting a lot of inedible outputs out of beef. So you are all familiar with leather, but binders for plastics and asphalts. We get insulin, china, piano keys, toothbrushes, film, wallpaper, fireworks, and heart valves are all, there's so many useful pieces to the cow that a lot of people are not thinking about when they're thinking about how awful red meat is. So the environmental factors. So this is usually the most common argument as to why we should not be eating red meat. So on the first slide here, the first image is wildebeest wandering through the savannas here, and that's what it sort of looked like in America before today. There were nearly 60 million bison running across America, and today there are only 30 million beef cattle. So when people argue the methane argument, we actually had more herbivores back then than we do today. As far as the water argument, there's been a lot of really inflammatory arguments saying that we use tons and tons of water, but there's a study out of UC Davis that looked at typical beef. So this is beef that all beef is raised outside and then brought to, conventional beef is brought to a feedlot only in the last portion of its life. So beef cattle are not raised indoors the way chickens and pigs are for their whole life. Dairy is an exception to that. But so the typical beef cattle uses about 410 gallons of water. What they're not accounting for is that the cows also pee out a lot of water and add a lot back into the soil. The grass-fed estimate is about 100 gallons of water per pound of beef. So that 410 number is about the same as rice. And I'm not hearing a lot of people say we need to cut down on our rice consumption. Very similar also to avocados, sugar, walnuts. Those are all very intensive water products, and those are not the headlines that I see in the papers. It's just beef, beef, beef. So this image of the cows here is a system we call mob grazing. So it's more closely mimicking the natural patterns of herbivores. And what you do is you take them, you intensively graze them, and then you move them almost daily, depending on how much pasture you have and how many animals you have. It's not something that I've seen a lot here in New Zealand. It's more important to do this in more arid areas where the land is a little more delicate. But this idea is that the cows eat down the grass, and then the grass has a chance to rest. They're being eaten spurs the grass to grow, and also it's healthier for the animals because there's a less parasite load, so they're not, when I see all the sheep out here on the same paddock all the time, that's lovely and beautiful and pastoral, but it's also not fantastic for the health of the lambs, because if one sheep has a very heavy parasite load, that parasite gets out, it gets into the grass, and then the entire flock gets infested with parasites. So this is what we're supposed to be eating in America. This is an industrial CAFO chicken house. So there are 8 billion meat chickens and 90 billion eggs that we get in America. There are also 10 million dairy cattle and 120 million pigs. They are all raised under fluorescent lights, very similar to that salad image I showed earlier, except for these are animals. But these are considered a more sustainable option to beef cattle. And I wanted to also mention that vegetables are not without social injustice. As a farmer, I can tell you that it's really hard to harvest vegetables. It's a lot easier to just move cattle around. We've got a lot of very serious issues in the U.S. with farm market workers not being treated great. That's a whole other slide, but I just wanted to mention that when people are saying that they eat a vegetarian diet because it's better, there's a lot of cost going on here. The morality cost is another one. So this theory of least harm, I don't want to kill an animal unless I need to. And actually, the biodiversity of a land like this really goes down. The birds, the frogs, the mice, the soil is completely, the biodiversity of what's underground is incredibly important, and that is really what an herbivore can do to these plains areas. But when you drive across America or when you fly over America, this is the kind of farming that you see. And unfortunately, we're just so removed from nature that people think that their vegetarian or grain-based diet is really much more moral because no cows died. But if you look at maybe the value of if all mammals are equal and you could kill one cow and survive for so long on meat from one cow versus how many bunnies and frogs and mice died in this process. I thought I was so brilliant when I came up with this slide, and then I saw on the AHS New Zealand website that there was something so similar to this, but I kept this one anyway. So we don't like to think of ourselves as animals as part of the ecosystem. We live in climate control boxes also, even plastic containers, and lead very disposable lives. And we don't know what our impact is on nature or how nature works. Only 19% of Americans believe in evolution. Hyperpalatable processed food is really what are driving our guidelines, major conflict of interest. I think this is the real elephant in the room with our diets here. When Americans are going to the stores, or when they're going out to eat, when they're spending money on food, only half of that is food for the home. The rest is food away from home, and it's usually not the healthiest options when people are eating in restaurants. And when they are going to the grocery store, these are two charts, so 1982 versus 2012. So in the last 10 years between these two, spending on meat has gone down from 31% to 21%, and our spending on processed foods has doubled. But we should all eat less red. So is a plant-based diet. So these are all plant-based foods here, and I just thought I'd go through some that I'm not hearing a lot of people complain about the price of a Snickers bar. These are US dollars in ounces, because that's how I think. So we've got chips at 27 cents per ounce, Starbucks caramel macchiato at 23 per ounce, Snickers bar 50 cents per ounce, and this tofurkey, this was even the price on Amazon, so it's probably even more expensive in the stores. Compared to these are the prices, retail prices for organic across the country, according to the USDA. So 13 cents per ounce for broccoli, 6 cents per ounce for organic carrots, 6 cents per ounce for potatoes, and 55 cents per ounce for vegetables. So 67 cents per pound less than tofurkey. And that's not even looking at the whole thermodynamic process that goes into producing tofurkey. So we're not really looking at the full cost that all the packaging and transport and all the fossil fuels that are needed to produce this subpar protein. And this is just another point I wanted to make. We're being told that this is elitist. So wanting to eat nutrient-dense food and support local producers, to pay their workers well, treat them fairly, don't spray chemicals on their crops, to produce animals in a humane way, that is not elitist. So to ignore these values and choose to purchase cheap food, I think is absurd. So some people think the end of cheap oil could change how we eat, and I'd like to think that too. So this whole entire system that we've got going on in the US is only possible because of cheap oil. We need cheap oils to produce GMO grains, to make all the fertilizers, to transport all these grains, these animals, to grow chickens, and then, I don't know if you know this, but they've recently started slaughtering chickens here and then shipping them to China to be processed and then coming back. But yet, white meat is not vilified, red meat is. So a more regional food system will be possible once the price of oil goes up. However, humans are really crafty, and fracking and other things come up and keep this issue of overabundance and unlimited resources going. So, how do you feel about America's foreign policy? Why would you want to copy our food policy? We're sick, lazy, and greedy. We ignore science and rely on assumptions, superstitions, fear, and money to guide us. There are a number of countries that have included sustainability in their food policy. A lot of them, almost all of them, do vilify meat. But there is one that I really liked a lot. So if you look at Brazil's national food policy, I just thought I'd go through this because it's really fantastic. They're the only one I've found so far that's pretty great. So the first point that I'd like to make out of it is always prefer natural or minimally processed foods. So their whole ranking is, just go for less processed and then a little more processed. Develop, practice, and share your cooking skills. So we've taken all the cooking skills classes out of schools. When eating out, choose restaurants that serve freshly made dishes and meals and avoid fast food chains. Be critical of commercial advertisements and food products. Encourage buying from small farms as opposed to large industrial farms. Food must be socially and environmentally sustainable, and includes workers' rights. I've never seen a food policy mention that. And then the best one, buy your food from farmers markets or grow your own. Touching a little bit on the last speaker's slides here, this is a new term that I've just learned recently, the Anthropocene. We actually had a film crew come to our farm to make a movie called Children of the Anthropocene. It's from France, so hopefully they'll translate it into English. But the Anthropocene means the age of man, recognizing that our species ascent to a geological phase on par with earth-shattering asteroids and planet-cooking volcanoes. Geologists predict that our geological footprint will be visible in radioactive materials from the atomic bomb tests, plastic pollution, and increased CO2. So when the alien geologists come down and look, this is what they're gonna call what we're breathing now. So, as much as I'd like to be a cheerleader, sometimes it's hard because I'm in a plane and I'm looking down and I'm seeing all the factory farming and all the devastation. So I live in a very beautiful organic farm, and I love the idea of all the sustainable agriculture, and I'm hoping that it'll go that way. I'm hoping that oil prices will climb and that we're going to be forced into a regional food system. But sometimes lately, that's all I can see, so that's it.